Hi, everyone. As you are entering the room, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Robin Akampora. I am part of the Office of Career Strategy, Director of Public Service Careers and Strategic Initiatives. We are very excited about today's information session on the United Nations. We have Manuela Morelli with us today. Manuela is the Human Resources Specialist and Global Talent Manager for the United Nations. And she has been a wonderful partner for our office for the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years now. I'm sorry, I guess your official title, Manuela, is Head HR Planning and Development. Is that correct? Yes,
That's
okay.
good. That's perfect.
Okay. She's changed titles, right? Which does not surprise me. So Manuela has been a wonderful resource for our office for, like I was saying, the last 4 or 5 years. She actually did some small group chats this morning and is now ready to speak to all of you about United Nations, about certain opportunities that you recommend, so overall how the United Nations hiring process works. This is going to be in a webinar format. So what we will do is first Manuela will give her presentation. And then as you have questions, you are welcome to put them into the Q&A below. And when the presentation concludes, then I'm happy to go into the Q&A chat and I will read the questions for Manuela so that she can provide some insight. So I will now turn things over to Manuela. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Robin, and hello, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be here, and great indeed partnership with you, Robin, and the Office of the Career Strategy and Services for Yale. Thanks a lot. So, as you said, we will spend the next 20 minutes talking about UN and the way United Nations recruits, and what are the competencies and what are the skills that are becoming really relevant to us, and how can this information, of course, helps you to shape your profile and hopefully get started with United Nations. Should you be keen in pursuing some opportunities with the system. So let me just start by giving a quick summary of my own career, I guess, because that's relevant maybe for the students to know. So I am currently based in Geneva, and I work for the International Telecommunication Union, which is a UN organization dealing with technology, ICT, and the mandate is basically to provide a sort of digital platform to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I've started my career in UN in this building in 2007 with the UN Secretariat in New York. And I was keen to see how things work on the ground for UN. So I soon moved to Africa, where I worked for the office in Nairobi, which is also headquarters, and UNICEF. And I've been quite mobile because after that, I have moved to Geneva, working for the World Health Organization and some assignments in FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organizations of UN. And I'm now in ITU. So I will, take this different perspectives of the different UN organizations into account, where I share with you some of the secrets, I would say, of how to get into the UN system. And what I found personally since the beginning of my career is that, the UN system has changed quite a lot in terms of how we work, how we make decisions. Now we are, of course, during COVID, all basically in hybrid forms of work, teleworking. We even had our General Assembly in an hybrid form. So the system is changing quite a lot, but what it's kind of stable is the really engaging mandate that most of the UN organizations have in, very important global issues such as climate change, human rights. And these are things that have really attracted a lot of young talent, and they are still, I guess, relevant nowadays. So the UN system is quite complex, I would say, not really complicated, but complex to navigate. And maybe I can help you to simplify it a bit. So it's over 80 organizations with different mandates, but depending on the nature of the mandates, they are grouped and they report to 6 different organs. And so as an example, if you are interested in security, and peace and security, you may look at the organizations that report to the Security Council. If you are more interested in economic and social impact kind of work, then there are specific UN organizations with mandates around food, and poverty, around culture, or around women and children. And so you can break them by thematic priority, and they all basically report to the Economic and Social Council. And we'll see some of these examples. And so there are 6 main, let's say, pillars about what UN does, and what is the specific humanitarian work that covers, and that helps to kind of simplify a bit the system and how to navigate it. So we even color coded this, as you can see, the 6 main organs on the left hand side, and then you have the different entities reporting to these organs. And I think probably the most known and even attractive, I think, for young talent are what we call specialized agencies. If you see the kind of light blue box on the right, where you have the World Bank, WHO, UNESCO, as we mentioned, ILO, FAO. So these are maybe the ones that are most known among the specialized agencies. And then, of course, if you look at the General Assembly Group, you have UNEP dealing with the environment programs, UNFPA, and then you'll navigate easily, in UNICEF and others that I believe you know. But this is just an example on how basically the reporting lines to the main organs could help you navigate according to your basically interests and what you like to contribute the most. So you may know that recently the agenda of UN has transitioned to what we call sustainable development goals. So before we had Millennium Development Goals, and now they became sustainable. And I think this is a key word that you may want to reflect a bit upon and read more about, because it's also very significant of how working for UN has changed in the last 5 years, 5 to 10 years, I would say, but most significantly in the last 5 years. Before, the work was much more bureaucratic, I would say, because the Millennium Goals were very ambitious, of course, and, very conceptual. And so there was a lot of negotiation, among governments, and it was absolutely, heavy in bureaucracy. Now we call them sustainable because we have targets. We have specific targets where, these goals around these topics that you find in the boxes, colored up, have really key performance indicators, things that we need to concretely achieve by a certain timeline. And therefore the work for UN, and also what you will find, should you have an opportunity, a work opportunity or experience opportunity with UN, is that you have more project-based, let's say, type of work. So concrete deliverables, things to be accomplished, and it has become much more dynamic. I would say even closer in nature to the work that NGOs do, or private sector, and some multilateral stakeholders with which UN collaborates. And I find this very engaging, because often students especially think about joining UN and do a lot of bureaucratic work, and slow kind of paced. But this is not really the case. We are much more dynamic than the past, and results driven. We even have a new methodology, to kind of shape the projects and the work, which is called the RBM, results-based management. And you may want to read more about it, because this is becoming one relevant skill also for UN employees, and therefore hopefully talent to attract. Now, one maybe assumption that I want to challenge, and I'm sure most of you have, is that people working for UN are based in duty stations that we may think about New York or Vienna or Geneva, where I'm currently based, so headquarters basically, and then you have maybe some field offices where living conditions are a bit more challenging. And actually, I want to challenge that assumption, because if you look at the statistics that we have here, you can easily understand how the majority actually of UN employees are based in the field. So we have over 50% of the population that are, who are in decentralized offices. And so headquarters locations, such as Geneva, Vienna, New York is the ones I've mentioned, and then we have Bangkok and a few others, one in Nairobi, are the places where UN employees are based, but not the majority of the population. So it's only 30%. The rest is in field offices. And of course, you have different types of fields, right? So you have duty stations where the living conditions are more challenging, and you have others where, of course, they are defined as family duty stations. So you can bring your family there, you can grow kids, in international schools. I mean, there's field and field, but it's not that the majority of people in UN work necessarily in bureaucratic, established headquarters offices. And the reason why I say that is not only because, of course, the willingness of working in the field or headquarters may change or may get adjusted depending on which phase of life you are, and that certainly we see that for talent and youth. Is not, a major issue to start maybe in a decentralized office and grow in an headquarters position later. But we know that for women, for example, or, at certain point of their career, it becomes more challenging to move. And I think that's important for you to consider this, right? I mean, since the beginning of your career, because you may have the chance to get an internship in a let's say in a duty station of interest, but at some point, even if you are where you want to exactly be, you will have to move to another duty station, because UN employees are quite mobile, and mobility is a sort of not mandatory requirement, but is highly desirable for the majority of the jobs, which means that we want you to change duty station, we want you to move functionally to different jobs and different projects. So that's how we also say that UN has become more and more dynamic. And also depending on where you work, the style of work and the type of work changes. Like these are two different pictures that I took. One while I was working in New York at the Secretariat, and I think you can easily guess which one of the two. And the other one while I was working for UNICEF in Mozambique. And you can see, one style is more being involved in meetings and board and prepare, like, draft the papers, for your supervisor. And the other one is to really follow the work that is happening on the ground. And I like to bring these two pictures as an example, because in both cases, I was doing my HR, human resources, kind of business management work. And it was different. When I was in Mozambique, for example, I was hiring, because that was part of my work as an HR officer. And I was hiring for medical doctors to do a vaccination campaign. And so I had to kind of go in the field and see that things were were done properly, and consultants were working, or medical doctors were working as they should have according to the contract. So I was doing the same thing, but it changed, in the style and the type of contribution that I was giving. And so it's important for you to picture, it's not all about how and what you read in the terms of reference or what you apply to, but what is actually expected from me, and is this really what I want and what I can contribute to. Now, looking specifically at the requirements and what it takes to get considered for these opportunities in UN, let's start with the entry-level opportunities. And the good news is that all organizations have the same requirements. So there may be some variations, in the way the jobs and the internships or the talent programs are advertised. But normally you can consider these things that I'm sharing with you as relevant and applicable across UN system. So in terms of the skills, general skills, let's say, and behavioral characteristics or competencies that we expect, especially for entry-level opportunities, because they give you a sort of indication of what the potential, in the candidate could be for a longer term career with the UN system, have pretty much to do with the definition of the international civil servant. So an international civil servant in UN, he's basically someone who has integrity and values and respect for diversity, gender sensitivity, and he's strategic and adaptable in the way we approach these global issues, right? So we want basically versatile and multi-skilled profiles that we can adapt to different projects, to different situations, different contexts. Some of them are also linked to the mobility, element that I described before. So these are things that we look in youth, especially for a longer term career with the system. And one concrete reference that I like to share while I do these presentations is the document that Kofi Annan has put together at the time he was Secretary General, which is the UN Competency Framework, and you can easily Google it, and you'll find it as a very nice booklet, color-coded, with the list of the characteristics that people should have, if they're willing to pursue a career in the United Nations. And I think this is beautiful language, actually, that you can use, to put together your motivation letter and your application, or even do an interview for a UN organization. So the way the workforce is kind of organized is based on these staff categories. So the initial level is interns, and then you have professional staff, then you have general service support, and national officers and field. Now, without going into details, I think what you need to understand here is that if you are an intern in UN, you are considered a regular staff. So of course you don't have the same entitlements, and the majority of UN organizations, I must say, they still do internships that are not paid or remunerated, although now you have beautiful opportunities to actually do virtual programs, so you don't have to actually move geographically to the duty station where the internship is. But if you are an intern, you are considered a potential for UN. So you basically have to contribute and be part of project teams, and have a role. Is not only learning, is contributing. And then you have two categories of staff: national staff and international staff. So what's a professional and higher is international, and national is basically if you work in your own country. Now, what we recommend is to pursue an international career, because internationals in UN are, of course, employees working in a country that is different from the country of nationality, but they grow in their career much faster, because that's, that goes with the definition of an international civil servant. We explained what the competency framework is, and one of the reasons also why I encouraged you to approach this document is that for each competency, there is a list of traits and characteristics, behavioral indicators that we also use to do competency-based interviewing. And so when you answer your questions, we can assess your level of maturity and solidity, expertise based on the answers that are around these indicators. And a tip that I give you is that it is mandatory for the hiring managers to refer to the competencies that are advertised in the terms of reference. So they can't ask other competencies than those. And so when you read the advertisement, be detailed in your reading, because you will have there all the competencies that will be used to assess your level of competency. And so that's very important for you to prepare to that. What does it take to be considered for an internship, and what is that you need to come with in your application? Well, first, you need to be enrolled in an academic program, and it could be a master's degree, a PhD, or you may be in the final year of your bachelor degree. We also consider, students that are fresh from their studies and that is being within 1 year after the graduation. So you need to be fresh from your studies or within them, basically, to be considered. We ask normally a second UN language, and again, for me, it's very important to stress this. You don't have to be proficient in that language. We don't ask that. What we want to see is that you may have started a course, you may have some notions and, how to work with that language. And then, of course, it will come with the practice, right? And we can make use of other tools. I mean, we have translations and language divisions in UN that can support you with the preparation of documents, and also they offer course language trainings when you are in UN. So we don't expect you to be proficient, but we expect you to have started the course and show that you are willing actually to progress with the level of knowledge and fluency. The duration of an internship is between 2 months and 6 months. And as we said, it comes without a remuneration. There are only few organizations, so UNHCR is one example, that have started to pay interns, and normally you are not paid, unfortunately, and that's why we encourage students to look for maybe sponsorships or scholarships from other institutions and universities that could help to do the program. I must say that all my interns in the last couple of years that, worked with us and for us were in distance. And so I had even somebody from the States. So it's totally feasible now to plan, virtual assignments and virtual internship programs, which is a plus, I would say, a pros, in the story of COVID, I guess, because our system is transforming enormously in this sense for HR policies. And also maybe another thing that is important for you to think is how your research project at university or the preparation of your final thesis could actually nurture the work that you do for UN, and how you could negotiate with the hiring manager, for your internship program, a sort of common ground that could help with the preparation of your research while you also, shape the project for UN. And that's why it's important to apply to things that are really relevant to you as an interest, I would say, because you don't, of course, know all the jobs that are there and how UN works until you are there. But it's important to kind of pursue things that are of interest, because that's how your curiosity, your contribution becomes more relevant, and you could use that also to nurture your academic path. The internships are advertised in the UN central website, but also individually in the different UN organizations. And as I said, the way things are written is very comprehensive, very clear. You'll see the competencies that are required, the duration by when you have to apply. And my advice is to look at the central, basically, website for UN, because everything is in there. But if there's 1-2 agencies that are more, let's say, of interest to you and closer to your studies, or you have a particular passion for those, my recommendation would be that from time to time you also visit the websites of these agencies, because the internships and the talent programs for this particular agencies will be advertised first on their web, and then they will be centralized in the central system of UN. Consultancies. So often I get the question, after I've done an internship, will I be considered for a consultancy opportunity? Well, yes, but yes, because having completed an internship with UN and applying to, a consultancy in UN represent an added value and advantage, because of course you will know already the system, your network will be, probably facilitating that, hopefully, if your performance was good. And also there may be, in some cases, relevancy between the work that you have done during your internship and what the consultancy is. But there are some admin rules from time to time that we need to work around. One example is that if your internship is in a headquarters, so let's say you do an internship in Rome with FAO, which is headquarters for this organization. Before you can apply to a consultancy in Rome, still for FAO, a period of 6 months needs to elapse, because we don't recruit interns as consultant in the same place where they've done the internship, because we encourage mobility, because we encourage people to look around, because we want you to look at other organizations as well. And so it's not that one career trajectory, starts from A and end to Z in a total linear manner. You need to kind of look things around and see how you can make your profile more attractive by becoming multi-skilled and also having moved possibly geographically or functionally. And that's why it's not possible administratively. But if you want to stay in Rome, for example, you can consider consultancies in other headquarters in Rome or in other organizations, UN organizations in Rome. And we have IFAD and WFP, or you may want to continue in FAO in a field office, for example, for a consultancy, given that consultancy can be also conducted in distance. You don't have to be physically present. Now, people ask me also, if I want to become a consultant right after my academic, path, can I do that, or I need to have some work experience? And no, you need to have some work experience, because normally you will see from how the consultancies are advertised, they require already not only some, let's say, level of expertise in the subject of the consultancy, but they have previous experience as a requirement. And what UN defines as experience is a full-time work that was paid, remunerated to cover, specific job functions. And that's normally possible after, at least the bachelor degree or a master degree has been completed and you have had some other work opportunities before you can apply to UN consultancies. There's no limit of age. And yes, indeed, after internships, we see more frequently, consultants getting hired as consultants while, after having completed an internship opportunities. And normally some months of experience are required. The advertisement are still same principle of the internships. They are in the central UN system, the website, but they are also advertised in the different UN organizations. So as we said, because there's some time elapsing, from when the information goes into the UN web, my advice would be from time to time to check the consultancies in the UN organizations that are closer, let's say, to your areas of interest. The third and last, I think, opportunity that is relevant for you to consider is the talent programs with UN. They are labeled differently. We have a variety of those. So you may have heard about the young professional officers, junior professional officers. UNICEF have what they call new emerging talent initiatives, and they have some age requirements. So normally you need to be under 32 for certain officers' jobs that, for example, deal with medical studies. We have a higher age. I think the limit is 35, if I'm not mistaken, but it depends, because it depends on the advertisement of each year. These programs are sponsored by the donor countries, and so your country of nationality needs to be a donor of UN. For developing countries, we also have, let's say, contributions that come from developed countries. So even if your country is not contributing to UN, you may see JPO jobs advertised under your country of nationality anyway in certain years. And you need a master degree and at least 2 years of experience. And now, PhD is considered work experience in most cases. Internships are also relevant, and of course, consultancies, if ideally they come with UN, even more. You need to be proficient in English. We say or French, depending on the duty station where you are, but I would say English is a must, and then a second UN language is an asset. And French normally for certain positions is also advertised as a requirement. I would say that French and Spanish are the most relevant languages in UN after English, for different reasons. Yes, what else? So on talent programs, I think if you don't qualify yet, one important thing that you may read among these lines is how to prepare to get there, and what is relevant for you to build, yeah, in terms of skills and experience, for you to be more attractive at the time, you will have these requirements, minimum requirements for you to apply. One is international exposure. And so what we say is it's very important while you do your studies, while you kind of navigate the job market, consider that if you are willing to pursue UN as an opportunity, we value a lot the international experience that you have in your resume. So it can be like, volunteering abroad, it can be social work impact, any experience that is close to your area of interest in SDGs areas, and how basically you shaped your CV through skills and experience around those. So you can prepare with that. You can prepare with language trainings. You can pursue research work at university, because we value a lot research skills. We have some gaps in the current workforce, on skills that are related to the way you do data analysis, data management, data visualization. So research-based work is becoming more and more important for us on resumes. And of course, the entry-level jobs beyond the talent programs have exactly the same requirements. So 2 years of experience and a master's degree. And I would like to close with this slide as a career trajectory, possible career trajectory in UN. So we said an internships as a start, and then ideally a consultancy and talent programs, and then UN jobs, entry level jobs, and of course we hire a lot from other sectors as well. So if you don't get an opportunity, for an internship at the very beginning of your career, you can still have maybe similar opportunities with some stakeholders working for UN from other sectors, and then still be attractive for other opportunities later on. But this is a typical career trajectory. Robin, I think I'll stop here because it's a lot of information, and I will hand over to you maybe to see if there's any questions that I can
Absolutely.
answer. Thank you very much.
That was very helpful, Manuela, just to kind of see because I know that's a lot of confusion, right? About like, where can I start based on like my education? So I thought that was a really helpful framework. I was going to throw in the chat before I start looking at the Q&A, that UN Competency Development Practical Guide that you had sent the link to. Okay, is that all right? So I will send
perfect.
that to all attendees. If you go to the chat, you will see the guide now. It's a PDF. It's 194 pages, so don't try to read it now. But I believe that's the guide that you were mentioning is really helpful for one before they're even like putting their application together, right, for interviews and that type of thing.
Absolutely. And it's easy to navigate. I mean, even in the index, if I recall correctly, there's already the list of the competencies that we look at. So, I mean, you certainly don't need to read it all, but it has the list of the skills, even, keywords that you can refer to for you to apply. Certainly.
That's super helpful. Thank you. Okay, so jumping over to the questions. The first one is, will international students be able to work at the UN?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're good there. Okay, so this one, this student is asking, what are some examples of careers at the UN that we could apply for with only an undergraduate degree, other than internships, or internships the best only way to get in right away? It sounds like you already answered that really it's internships.
Yeah, it's the only way, and it's one of the most really relevant and structures way you can do that. There are some assignments, I know, with some let's say shorter term opportunities with some university or institutions, but they are much less recognized, I would say, and they are not considered as work experience, whereas internships are really fulfilling, the requirements for the next job in UN.
Absolutely. And the next question is kind of similar, but how should we go about finding internships for undergraduates? Is there anywhere in particular you would recommend we look? So far, all I have found is opportunities for grad students, which I believe you answered, about going to the UN Central website, but then also checking the specific UN areas, the UN organizations, like the specific ones, because you said it goes there first, and then it has a little bit
Yeah.
of a delay time before it goes to UN Central.
Yeah.
Is that pretty accurate? Yeah.
Yeah, it's precisely that. And then of course work with the network, because one thing that is maybe interesting for you to know is that there's a number of organizations that do what we call direct selection. And so if there is a potential hiring manager, right, or a head of a division or a service that need some contribution to projects, and via the network we see resumes that could be suitable, we could run short interviews and do direct selection without necessarily having to do a competitive process with a high number of applicants. But even in that case, it would be still mandatory for the students to apply to the web. But it can be direct selections. It's not many organizations, but there's a number of those. And I think it's important to work both on the network and the central system.
Okay. And when you were giving that slide that showed like an example of a posting, one thing that I thought of that I get a lot of questions on is, so let's say I have a senior who comes to my office, they're here in September, and they say, I would love to get an internship with the UN, but obviously they also need to graduate from school. So I'm curious about like turnaround time when it says, it's the date posted. Should they be applying to things in the fall, or is that too early? Should they really wait to the spring? I know every agency is different, every unit's different, but any overall advice about that?
Yeah, sure. So we have two terms that are normally the ones for all UN organizations. So it's indeed the spring and fall. We always say try to look for these opportunities at least 6 months from your graduation, because it takes in any case a while. And because being enrolled in an academic program is actually a requirement, or being within 1 year from completion, makes you still eligible. It's very important that, these things are pursued sufficiently in advance for maybe being able to choose among, a few options, or put the application for more than one organization. And so that's what we recommend. Yeah. And there's the possibility also to express interest throughout the year, even if the internships are advertised in particular times. Yeah.
Okay, so to be safe, really starting earlier is better. But
Right.
with
Exactly.
yes, yeah.
Precisely.
Let's see. Are there opportunities? So two questions really for the same thing, that students who are curious that are undergrads, but is there anything that they can apply for before their senior year?
I would say that is still the same. So there will be eligible for internships, and if they have some, let's say, work experience somehow, also because between graduations there have been some time elapsing. I mean, these are really specific cases that we should look at, but the main criteria to think of is, do I have experience? Do I have work experience? And if I don't have work experience, then I only qualify for internships at the moment, unless I acquire that experience somewhere else. UN has really this kind of criteria at the basis of any eligibility requirements, which is, do I have experience or not? And if not, then I only qualify for internships, and internships will count against that month's, those months of experience that I need to apply to other opportunities, basically.
But if I'm like a sophomore, let's say, I can't even apply for the internships, correct? I have to be in my senior year.
Correct. In that case, you need to be, you can only apply to internships if you are in the last year of your bachelor.
Okay.
Yeah, minimum. Yeah.
Okay, and then just two more questions. Let's see. You said that work experience is necessary for applying for consultancy jobs. for the consultancy positions, is PhD considered as work experience?
It is absolutely. Also for the reasons I said before, that we are lacking research skills. And so
Right.
therefore it is considered. I know there are some organizations that still make some exceptions to that. And but that has nothing to do actually with the eligibility requirements. Normally, yes, the PhD is considered work experience.
And for entry level jobs, is that the same as well? That the PhD
The
would
same
count?
as well,
Yes. Okay.
precisely. Mhm.
Okay. And then the last question we have is for someone who's been trying to get into the WHO multiple times and has not heard back and was curious to hear, are there ways to make their application more competitive? They've just found the process a little bit challenging since they don't typically respond to you, unless you're to move forward. So they're not really
Yeah.
getting any feedback, I feel like. I mean, I think that the competency guide would certainly be something to refer back to. I know you mentioned
Yeah.
networking is a big part of this. I mean, I would say that as a career advisor, but
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, this these things have to do with the volume that is managed by the organization. So we the number of applications is enormous, and normally what we do for the HR policies is to say, if you are in the final stage, right, and you are interviewed or you did a test. In that case, you will get some kind of feedback on the process. But if you're not shortlisted and you are not in the final stage, there are some organizations that even have the disclaimer saying only those who will go ahead will be notified and not the others. So we don't have the policy for feedback for all the applicants, and I know it can become a bit frustrating. Even UN employees have the same frustration, because when you are a UN employee, you don't have normally an indefinite contract. Every 2, 3 years, 4 years, you need to apply to other jobs, and so
mm,
we go through the same machine as everybody else, and we are subject to these policies. And so my advice would be to always combine a network with a good application, but the complexity and the amount of applications won't necessarily allow for a one-to-one feedback, unfortunately. Yeah.
and perhaps looking at other UN areas, right? If
Yeah,
you're not having luck with
absolutely,
that one.
absolutely, absolutely. And also the other consideration is, that UN is working more and more multilaterally. So on
Right.
some of these global issues that we said before, climate change, human rights, we work a lot with NGOs as well. We
Mhm.
work a lot with private firms. And so, I think the angle from which students should take this from their own career is, what is UN doing on these global issues, and what are the partners? What are the other entry doors that I could consider? The more you read, the more you network, the more you realize that maybe you want to have a chance, for the next 6 months with UN, but you can have an internship with an NGO or a private firm that could become a relevant experience in your resume for you to jump into the system right after. So we work more and more multilaterally, and so these are things that are important to consider, when we
Absolutely.
put together, or when we prepare our career path. Yeah.
Absolutely. There was one other question that came in. How about people graduating in winter 2022, when to apply? So I would assume it would be the same thing, that you're thinking six
Same
months out,
thing.
6 months
Yeah,
out. So whatever
exactly.
six
Yeah.
months is prior, that's what you would want to do.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Manuela. This has been incredibly helpful. We so appreciate your time between the chats and then also providing us this fantastic info session. And hopefully those who are on the call, were able to get a lot out of this. I know I was, and we always appreciate you taking the time for Yale to kind of give us all of this great insight.
Same for me. And thanks again. And yeah, thank you, Robin,
Thank
very
you.
much. And
Okay.
bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye bye.